Hello, and welcome to School Food for Thought, the School Nutrition Association's podcast. Today we're recording from SNA's annual national conference in Boston, where nearly 7,000 school nutrition professionals are gathered to share best practices, participate in education sessions, tour the exhibit hall, and pick up new ideas for their school meal programs. One of the biggest topics of the discussion at ANC this year is USDA's final rule, updating school nutrition standards. My name is Patti Montague, and I'm the Chief Executive Director of the School Nutrition Association. And joining me today, I'm thrilled to have Cindy Long, USDA's incoming Deputy Undersecretary for Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Services. Welcome, Cindy, and congratulations. You bring a wealth of experience to this position, have worked in USDA's child nutrition programs now for over 13 years, if I have that right.
That's right.
And believe you're regularly attended ANC since 2008.
Well, that's certainly true. I have attended many ANCs, and it's always just such a pleasure to see all the excitement and creativity happening in the school meals programs.
Great. For our listeners who can't be with us at ANC this year, could you share how you and your team are involved in the conference? You know, I know you bring a number of people, and even share how many people come every year. Is it more than normal? And just give us a flavor for what you've been doing since you arrived.
Yeah, well, you know, we see the ANC as one of the most important pillars of our partnership with SNA and with the school nutrition community. You know, I think we have somewhere between 45 and 50 USDA staff, and frankly, that's pretty typical. You know, as you know, Patty, we participate in the conference in a number of different ways. This year, we started actually with a pre-conference, which we had to share some information with state agencies. We have a number of education sessions ranging from everything around nutrition education to very operational topics like crediting. And then, of course, you know, we just have so many informal opportunities to converse with individual operators, industry partners, to bring small groups together, and just to have really valuable conversations on the exhibit floor.
Well, I know every year you bring a big group, and we're really appreciative because we all know the cost of doing so, and we appreciate the support. And I know a lot of members were very excited to share about the listening sessions that you were doing, and they had an opportunity to be with you and when your team. And of course, you were a key partner for SNA all the time. You come to SNIC, LAC, speak, join us, come with our patron meetings, and we do greatly appreciate all that you do for us. And the partnership that we've have able to build over the last, I think always, but has strengthened us since COVID, working
Absolutely.
together.
And we, as I said, we really value the partnership too, Patty, and it's a two-way street, and we really appreciate you giving us the flexibility around, what specific topics and activities we want to do here. So appreciate
great.
that.
So I want to turn our attention to nutrition standards, the final rule. Could you remind our listeners of the timeline for developing these regulations? I know we've been talking about the rules for several years, and we're all glad that they're finally out. But a lot of people, the rules came out, and it was just when schools were starting to shut down. So if you could talk a little bit about that, would be great.
Yeah, well, if you go back to the days of COVID and when we were coming out of COVID, you'll remember that during COVID there were a lot of waivers, including waivers around nutrition standards, and there was a lot of uncertainty for a whole variety of reasons around the nutrition standards as we were coming out of COVID. So the first thing that USDA did in February of 2020, we put out something that we called a transitional rule or a bridge rule that basically said, hey, what we were doing before COVID on whole grains, sodium, and flavored milk is going to stay the same. So we gave everybody that clarity for the next few years, but we also made it clear that we need to we have an obligation to be periodically updating the standards to be consistent with the dietary guidelines, so that we were going to be starting that process. And so we spent about a year after that really taking in input and engaging with folks about what they thought the proposed rule ought to look like. And the proposed rule came out about a year and a half ago. And then we went through the formal process of hearing people's comments and thoughts, and then finally came to the publication of the final rule back in April of this year. And so now we're moving towards the implementation phase of the rule. And I think we'll probably have a chance to talk about this more later, but folks have the option of adopting some things as soon as they can, as soon as they want, but nothing is required in terms of things in the final rule until next school year.
I think people are definitely relieved about that part, and I think you were very clear all along that was going to be the case.
Yes, we tried to be clear.
So before we dig into the details on the rule, I want to take an opportunity to thank you and your team for this process, the work in process. It's clear you listen to the concerns of the people in the trenches every day that are feeding the kids. Our members raised during the comment period, they're listening, and you really consider the operational challenges that are facing schools. And so we greatly appreciate, and I know more importantly, the people that are feeding the kids every day do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for that, Patty. And I have to say, USDA deeply appreciates the time and the effort and the thought that folks in the school nutrition community put into the conversations they had with us, to their formal comments. It has really helped us get to what I think is a good place in the final rule.
Yeah, I think everyone's on board with that. So starting off with the rules are staying the same for whole grains and flavored milk. Is still an option for all schools, correct? So just some clarity, and we get questions about it. Again, it's a lot of questions come in, but people still haven't really dug down into them, so maybe you can give some clarity there would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So with respect to whole grains, we are continuing to be in the place that we have been for a number of years. Schools have to, do need to serve primarily whole grain rich products, but there is flexibility for them to about 20% of the time, 1 in 5 days, to serve enriched grain products that'll help them serve some of those traditional favorites that maybe just don't work as well as whole grain rich products, and just to provide that little bit of flexibility that they need. And with respect to flavored milk, yes, flavored milk continues to be available. It will continue to be available under the final rule, and we'll probably talk more about added sugar, but the flavored milk will have requirements around how much sugar, and we are really thrilled that the dairy community has already stepped up and basically committed to meeting those standards.
Yeah, that was pretty exciting last year, and after the proposed rule came out, that the Dairy Council, dairy people came together, jumped on that, understanding the importance of milk and the non-nutrition factors or nutrients that are so important to kids, that they did that. I think it's going to have a big impact, and I know the members really appreciate that as well. So,
right.
Starting off, the rules are staying. So we talked about whole grains and milk. But two of the most notable regulatory changes for them are related to sodium and added sugar.
Right.
So let's start with sodium. Please describe the new limits and how you considered the feedback from, I know industry played a big role, and the program operators when finalizing them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, some of the most consistent messages we got on the feedback for sodium were that the standards needed to be something that was operationally achievable now, and that we needed to consider things like naturally occurring sodium, and that we needed to be menuing items that were not only consistent with dietary guidance, but that the kids would eat. So we really took that under consideration. We worked very hard to kind of come up with the place that would meet those goals. And so we landed on a target that I think was familiar and that most folks felt was ambitious and serious, but also achievable. And that was something that was known as Target 2 from the prior rule. So that's where we are. The other thing we heard was that folks need time to adjust. And so the new sodium standard, which is, again, based on the Target 2 from the previous requirements, doesn't go into effect until 3 years from now, so that there's a good long runway for industry partners to reformulate, for folks to think through their menus, and to just, do all the preparation that's necessary.
That's great. And I heard, I think the members sort of took a breath of relief to say, wow, they listened to us, and I know industry is going to play a big role in helping to plan those menus,
right,
and helping the members prepare for this change that's coming forward. But I think, giving that time frame for them to be able to prepare is really key. So we appreciate that. So the new added sugar limits are a bit more complicated for some, with new product-specific limits plus a weekly cap.
Right.
So can you walk through what those requirements will look like?
Sure, absolutely. Well, let me start off by saying it's important to realize that the added sugar limits, we think, are really fundamentally going to be a breakfast issue. Because when you look at the data, many of you probably know, many of the listeners probably know, the dietary guidelines suggest that Americans shouldn't get more than 10% of their calories from added sugar. When you look at the data, lunches are pretty close to being there. I mean, it's just not an issue. Breakfast has some work to do, and it's frankly something that we've heard about, and I know the membership has as well, Patty, from teachers, from parents, just concerned that there's just a little too much sugar in breakfast. So what we did was, starting not this year, but in the following school year, there will be some limit on the amount of sugar that can be in 3 specific products. We've talked about one, and that was the flavored milk. And again, we feel like we're in a really good place there. The industry has said that they can make that. So I think that'll be very straightforward. We also have limits on the amount of sugar that can be in breakfast cereals, as well as yogurts. And those were 2 food items that we focused on because the data showed us that those were among the very top sources of added sugar in school breakfast. We did take a look at what's available on the market, and we in both cases the limits, there are currently products that can meet, plenty of products that can meet the limits, and frankly we think that there are going to be a good number more by the time we're at next school year.
So it's interesting, at the Star Club breakfast yesterday morning, and General Mills sponsors it, and they shared with us the menus as part of their presentation, and helping the members and seeing what can be done, and also what currently, they brought the product down.
Right.
And I know we're talking to Kellogg's the same thing, and I know the yogurt manufacturers have been looking at it as well, so it's wonderful news. I think we all see it's good to bring the sugar down, and as we're trying to fight this obesity crisis that's in our country right now.
Absolutely. And so that's the first step for sugar, are those product-based limits. And then jumping ahead 3 years, then it's similar to sodium. There'll be sort of an across-the-board 10% limit on the amount of calories from added sugar, and that'll work very much the same way as the sodium limits have, right? You look across the whole week, you average the week. It doesn't mean you can't occasionally, you can't serve products that have more than 10%. It's just what you menu them with within the meal and over the course of the week. And again, those product-based limits are really designed to help schools take a big first step in getting there, so that they'll be well prepared on the path to getting to that second limit after 3 years.
So we've been talking to members, collecting feedback, and someone asked a question: how does USDA define added sugars in the rule?
Yeah, basically, added sugars are anything that's added to sweeteners that are added, like sucrose and, I'm not a food technician, but that are added during the manufacturing or the baking or cooking process. It does not, and this is really important, it does not include naturally occurring sugars. So fruits, which have a lot of naturally occurring sugar, fruits are good, fruits are fine. So it's really about those items where sugar is, as the name suggests, is added to the product.
And then some other folks are concerned with the sugar limits that artificial sweeteners could start to be introduced in foods, and they're concerned. So that's a question. Is that something you're tracking and are going to be keeping an eye on?
Well, it's certainly something that we're hearing too, Patty. So we absolutely are aware that's a concern. So one of the things we'll be focusing on in our technical assistance is, and I know there's a lot of other folks out there that'll be helping support this too, is just information on how you can substitute for sugar without using artificial sweeteners. Things like using fruit-based products. And just sort of altering menus. And again, I know manufacturers are going to be looking at that too. So it's really very much a choice at the local level what to use. At the end of the day, we do follow the FDA's guidance around what ingredients are safe, and so we'll continue to monitor that as well.
And so another question we get: do you know when the USDA Foods product info sheets listing sugars, will they mention anything about artificial sweeteners?
Yeah, so I'm really happy to say, because this is something that's new. We have, beyond the product sheets, we now have a USDA Foods database.
Yep, that's
and
right.
so that includes not only the nutritionals, including the added sugar, but it includes allergens and other ingredients. So it's really a nice resource, and we would really appreciate folks' feedback, because it really, as I said, it's a pretty new resource, so we'll continue to tinker with it as needed.
Great. And will USDA Foods offer more low sugar or sodium options moving forward?
Absolutely. As I'm sure you know, we've done a lot of work on the sodium front, and we're continuing to look at that. We're trying to be very consistent with the FDA's voluntary guidance for sodium. We will because the added sugar piece is new, our folks are already working hard to take a look at the USDA foods portfolio and seeing if there are opportunities there as well.
That's great. So we know about the added sugars and the breakfast implications, but in the final rule, are there other changes, a few changes that related to breakfast? Can you talk a little bit about there other changes related to breakfast?
Yeah, there are. I would say probably the most impactful change for most operators is that we used to have the prior standards really kind of leaned heavily on grain products, and there was a way to substitute meat alternates for grain, but it's fair to say it was kind of complicated and very confusing. So now we've gone back to how things were a number of years ago, where grains and meat alternates can basically be substituted for one another.
Yep.
So it'll be easier to serve some of the these protein products that are traditional at breakfast, eggs, yogurt, cheese, things like that. I would say that's the most impactful.
And that's great because we know protein really helps kids get started in their day. I know myself, I start my day with protein.
Yep,
every
me too.
day.
Yogurt every day.
Yep. Right. Interesting. So our members are obviously very proud to support American farmers and the ranchers, and they prioritize buying American products. So heard a lot of questions about the new rules regarding Buy American provisions, and could you talk a little bit about those changes?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Biden-Harris administration is very committed to supporting Buy American, and as you mentioned, Patty, there has been a long-standing Buy American provision in the school meals program. And so we've been doing a lot of work to make it easier for folks to buy American, including one of the things that's in the new rule is an allowance to do a straightforward local preference in your purchasing, which we think is going to help folks a lot. And looking more broadly at USDA, widely has been doing a lot of work to strengthen local and regional supply chains across its whole USDA portfolio. It is true that the rule does, for the first time, implement a limit on the amount of non-American products that can be bought. But like the other aspects of the rule, that's on a pretty long glide path. Starting not this coming school year, but the one after that, that cap will be 10%. And then over the course of, I believe it's 6 years, it gradually steps down to 5%.
Yeah, so some of the questions received, it seemed we've received more questions on the My American than anything else. So I have some of those questions.
Sure.
I thought would be great because I think it's important to get that out so people don't have misconceptions as we prepare to go implementation. So one of the questions has to do with the FAR, or the Federal Acquisition Regulation for non-available. So although items of the list like bananas and canned pineapple don't have to be documented, these items still count toward the cap on non-domestic purchases, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and really, again, the idea was to try to be really true to the spirit and the intent of the Buy American provision. And now we did want to make it a little easier for folks with respect to those products that we know just aren't produced here. As you mentioned, the bananas, that's a good example. So you don't have to have a justification or anything like that. But it does have to be tracked toward the total value.
That's what I thought. So some of the smaller school districts that have limited staffing and direct deliveries to cafeteria, they don't seem to have a system, or they say they don't have a system to track whether the U.S.-grown products or produce they ordered was substituted last minute without a foreign-grown product. So this could be a significant reporting burden for them, for understaffed schools. So how are you going to work or help these schools to make that transition going forward? Yeah,
well, we were certainly aware that of the concerns that you raised. And so another tool that we released pretty recently is something that we're calling an implementation tracker. And it's an optional tool that schools can use if they want to help their staff just keep track of the non-American items that they're buying, to sort of enter it into a sort of simple spreadsheet, and it'll help with that tracking against the requirements. And again, we'd really appreciate feedback from folks listening to this podcast on that tool, because we're always looking to improve the resources that we're providing.
Yeah, great. And then one other concern regarding the Buy American. So operators concerned that the non-domestic cap will impact the amount of fresh produce that they serve, particularly in winter months when a variety of fresh grown options are limited. So will the USDA track the impact on the menus? What will you be looking at there? Yeah,
well, as I said before, we are working really hard to make more fresh local products available to schools in a whole variety of different ways. Again, that's across USDA. Not only the support that we provide through things like Farm to School, but our sister agency, AMS, has put out lots of grant fundings that are specifically for states to purchase local food. So my point being is we really are trying to make sure there's a strong availability of local foods, including local produce. Now, that said, we are pro fruit and vegetable. So we certainly don't want to see any unintended consequences of this new rule causing challenges, serious and unintended consequences there.
Absolutely.
So, again, that's part of the rationale for this sort of long glide path eventually toward that target of 5%. We will of course be monitoring that. And look, if there's a real challenge, we'll work with you and our partners in the school nutrition community to fix it.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. So the rule included several menu planning flexibilities that have just taken effect. So could you walk us through some of those highlights? Because I don't think people realize that.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad you asked that, because we've been emphasizing that nothing is required this school year. However, if there are things you want to start doing, you can start implementing anything you want as early as, right now, this school year. And even though we focused a lot on some of the sort of big picture items like sodium and added sugars and Buy Americans, there's actually a lot of sort of flexibilities and other aspects to this rule. So I'll just mention a couple. I've already mentioned the flexibility to more directly require that items that you purchase are local. That is something that you don't have to wait. You can start using that right away. Another great flexibility is that substitution that we talked about earlier for the grains and the meat alternate flexibility. That's available right now. And if you dig into the rule, there's a lot of sort of pretty detailed crediting related flexibilities. For example, hummus, there's a way to credit hummus now that's reflected in the rule. So, and again, anything that's in the rule that you're saying, this is great, I want to do it, you can start doing it right now. So I'd really encourage everyone to take a look at some of those maybe less flashy elements of the rule and see what opportunities it presents for you.
That'd be great. I think if they start doing that now, it'll help them transition when the other rules kick in the next couple of years. So
absolutely.
That's great. So switching gears now. So we've heard from some members, we all know the staffing challenges, some financial procurement challenges, and, some of them are concerned. Some of them are doing great already on sodium, and they've started maybe a little sugar. But, and we're urging Congress, obviously, a lot. We've talked about needing to get more funding to support the investments in hiring and equipment and infrastructure and to manage higher food costs. So, and during COVID, you all were able to help us, the Commodity Corporation, Credit Corporation, giving the funding. A lot of people say, well, what can USDA do to help us on the funding piece? And you and I have talked about this, and it's really Congress that has to do that. So if you could talk a little bit about that and to help maybe educate our members a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, Patty, this USDA and this administration has been very committed to supporting the school nutrition programs with resources. I think over the last 3.5 years, we provided over $5 billion in support using the paths that we have at USDA. You mentioned the Commodity Credit Corporation, which was the biggest one. And we're going to continue to, with the flexibility we have, to be as supportive as we possibly can. But some of the most fundamental changes in the reimbursement rate, for example, those are Congress. Going to a universal school meals program, that's something that Congress would have to do. And I'll mention that many of you are probably aware that early on in the administration, we had a White House conference on hunger, nutrition, and health. And a whole anti-hunger, pro-nutrition strategy came out of that. And one of the key things for USDA was that it was clear that from President Biden on down that we support a path towards healthy school meals for all. And the tool we have to do that right now is CEP. So we've provided more flexibility with who qualifies for CEP. We have proposed to Congress in every one of our budgets, every one of President Biden's budgets, a change in the formula that would make it more financially feasible for more schools and pump more resources into the program. That's in our FY25 request, and we will continue to make the case to Congress that we need to move in that direction.
Well, I also think it's important for our members to reach out, especially I always encourage them back to school. Keep in touch with your congressman, your senator, invite them to your schools, and then tell them you need that money, that they have to invest because they're going to need it. They're facing some increased staffing costs, food costs, equipment costs. So we really need them to continue to be the strong advocates that they've been over the last couple of years. You got to keep the fight, right?
Oh, absolutely.
To get what we need.
So two things I would say. There is nothing like having someone actually eat one of the fantastic lunches that folks serve, and then tell them how much money you had, and then tell them that didn't pay for just the food. That had to pay for everything, the labor, the administration, every single thing. And I think you will walk away with somebody who's been got a little better education about school lunches.
Oh, absolutely. Every opportunity, I enjoy educating people because they don't realize it takes to do it.
They do not.
And what our members and school nutrition operators around the country do every day to ensure kids are fed healthy and nutritious meals. So.
Absolutely. And delicious. I mean, I think folks are sometimes have very outdated or uninformed perspectives on school lunch. But once you eat a school lunch and you see a bunch of them, you'll change your mind.
So we were really glad to see when you limited the requirement that states take fiscal action on schools, working to meet standards but failing to hit the targets. So we are hearing, however, often hear from states and regions, they implement certain rules differently, and some states don't make waivers or regulatory flexibilities readily available to their school districts. As much as we try to hope to be consistent across the country, you all put out the rule, you try to educate the states and work with the states. So I guess the question is, will USDA actively encourage states and the regions to provide these flexibilities, and how will ensure the rules are implemented? So what else can be done? And again, as state agencies work with the districts of the state, what else can do, or even what can SNA do to help you to get that word out?
Yeah, well, absolutely. We are messaging to everyone involved in the system that the goal here is to get folks on a path and to bring everybody to where they need to be. We do not see this as a gotcha kind of situation. That is not productive at all. And I'm glad that you mentioned the fact that there is no longer required financial penalties or fiscal action, to use the lingo, when a state comes in and finds, maybe a problem with the nutritionals, something like that. And I want to emphasize, and we're emphasizing this with state agencies, it's not a waiver. It's not only for special circumstances. States they used to be required to take funds back, and they are not required anymore. End of story. So, I would say what we're saying to state agencies, again, is the goal is to work in partnership and bring folks along. If there's it should be the exception rather than the rule that tool of financial penalty is used.
And I think that's great. I know the members appreciate it. I mean, ever since HIFCA was first introduced, people would ask questions about that all the time. And of course, you held off. And then, of course, now you provided that flexibility. So I think people really appreciate it. So I know, again, we talked earlier, throughout the last year, even this year, you've done listening sessions. Here you're doing listening sessions. So when you've been talking to people about the rules, what are some of the other questions they've asked you that maybe I haven't asked you about, or other things that were brought up that you think our members, listeners would love to hear about?
Yeah, well, I would say, sort of broadly, the feedback that we've gotten has been we've been really pleased with the feedback. I mean, I do think that people appreciated the opportunity to be involved and to provide their perspective on the rule throughout that whole development process. I get a sense that most folks in this broad community are kind of ready for those days of uncertainty and back and forth and what are the requirements going to be, and just that whole kind of turmoil that we've been in for a long time over standards. That we seem to, I'm hopeful that we're in a place where that's coming to an end, and I hear that feedback. In terms of the concerns or questions folks have, one of the things we heard just in these last couple of days is, folks still do have concerns about, well, are the products going to be out there? We hear a lot of talk about scratch cooking, but we can't do everything. We don't have the equipment. And so one of the things I want to emphasize is I really do feel like there are many, many, many industry partners who are committed and they're not looking back. They're going to go forward. They're going to develop the products that are necessary to meet the sugar and the sodium standards. They're going to, continue to provide technical support to schools about how to serve them, how to menu them, and so that support will be there.
Great. So in regards to the timeline for releasing detailed guidance on the rules, I know you started putting out guidance. So more about that, and then what is the best place for operators to get the information?
Well, as you said, we've put out we're kind of figuring out priority, like sort of what do people need to know earliest. So there'll be guidance rolling out continuously over the course of the coming months. There's multiple sources to stay up to date. Certainly, I think having a good, strong communication channel with your state agencies is critically important. I know states communicate differently, whether it's through the website or doing email blasts, but that's critical to keep up. And you can always come to USDA's website as well. We post all the stuff that we send to states is available publicly if SFA directors, SFA staff want to take a look at that. And then again, you can always reach out to USDA. So we're here, your states are here, and we're going to work together to make sure you have the information you need as we move towards implementation.
That's great. And I've commended you all when the rule first came out. I thought the video you did, I saw on LinkedIn, it was great.
Yeah, we love that.
The infographics and everything, and we've talked about it, and I've heard the feedback from members. They look back at what was available when HIFCA came out and are so appreciative of the tools that you've come up with and find it very helpful. So I just wanted to share that with our listeners. I encourage you to go to the USDA website and to look at that. And also great tools to educate your staffs as well. It's not just for the director or the supervisors, but use to educate their staffs in the kitchen who every day are feeding the kids the food. So
no, absolutely. And I would add to that, Patty, I think the little videos are also great tools for educating parents in the community. It's a very kind of light, accessible way to understand what these changes are and why, and that they're fine and they're good, and we're going to be doing more of that kind of tool.
So we have over 320 companies exhibiting here, and they want to ensure the products and recipes meet the new regulations. We've heard good feedback from them. They were all afraid that sodium was going to go all the way to target 3, and I think they're real happy about that. But who should they contact? We asked by them, who should I contact if they have questions about the rules at USDA?
Yeah, well, I mean, they can certainly contact us. We have we have built a really strong external affairs staff here at USDA, and while folks are here at the conference, I know the list is coming out afterwards, but they can certainly come see us at our booth. But again, just go to our website. It's pretty clear. Like you can click on and send an email to our external affairs staff, and they are wonderful. They will get back to you and have a conversation.
Well, I've enjoyed catching up with you today on the nutrition standards, and always, love talking to you. And even to share with our listeners, Cindy and I must talk about once a month.
Yeah.
During COVID and supply chain, we were talking about once a week there. And she's a busy lady, and I appreciate the partnership. We've talked about it, but you're busy and I'm busy, but our communication and talking and providing the feedback based on what we're seeing or hearing from people and vice versa, I think is what got us through the pandemic and helped enabled our members to be successful and as they recovered from the pandemic. So again, I appreciate the partnership and the support you provide us. But is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today about anything new that's coming about or your experience here?
Well, first of all, Patty, thank you. And we feel the same way about the partnership with SNA and the community. That investment in communication up front can save a lot of time and heartache later on.
Yes.
Nothing's more important than communication. The other thing I want to share is that, I've said this before, including at this conference, but I really feel that we're at an inflection point for school meals. There's a lot of challenges, but there are great things happening. The meals are fabulous. They're getting better. We're seeing improvements in access through healthy school meals for all. And, I am totally committed to telling anyone who will listen to me how wonderful school meals are And I encourage everyone listening to this podcast to do the same. Don't take it for granted that people know how great school meals are and all the exciting things that are happening. Tell your story on social media or wherever else you'd like to communicate. We can't talk about this enough.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We look forward to working together as we continue and with the introduction of the new standards.
Absolutely. Thank you, Patty.